Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 12 of English 2332. Well, we're still in the Middle Ages, kind of the late Middle Ages, getting close to the end, and we're still in Western Europe, specifically Italy. And this week, we're going to learn all about Geoffrey Chaucer and the introduction to the Canterbury Tales, the general prologue. All right, so what do you need to know about Chaucer? Well, of course, I've posted up the PowerPoint for you. I know that you've reviewed that and taken your notes. Let me just point out a few of the more salient details that you're welcome to jot down. Okay, he's born the son of a prosperous wine merchant. So he's born kind of upper crust, and then he's adopted is not the right word, but he's placed in the service of this lady named the Countess of Ulster. And what this means is he'll get better training, he'll get better connections, better networking, he'll get a better education, and just a better overall life experience, especially in the court and society. Don't forget, their entire culture in this time had three main parts: commoners, which was 80% of everybody, including serfs, commoners, and then the court, which were nobility, which were a fairly small portion, and then the members of the church. And of course, if you've looked at that thing on the hierarchy of the church, then you know the church had a lot of different positions, a lot of different people serving, from friars up to deacons and archdeacons and bishops and archbishops and pope. And so, yeah, the church permeated society. There weren't a lot of members of the church, although they were educated, but they spread out. And the church had an unreasonable amount of control over society because they were educated, and then they could teach what they thought was important to the uneducated, usually through the means of sermons. Okay, now back to Geoffrey Chaucer. He's this young man growing up. It's called the father of English poetry, and he becomes like this ambassador slash messenger slash spies for various kings of England, and he served under three different kings. That's significant. It means he was very trustworthy, he was likable, he was personable, and also the fact he didn't get brushed aside. In our culture, when we elect a new president, he comes in and sweeps house. He gets rid of all of the former president's advisors and all of his, usually even his staff and stuff. Even members of the same party like to start with their own people. And kings were no different. But the fact that three of them kept Geoffrey Chaucer on tells you he was significant and influential. He was a messenger, and as a messenger of the court of the king, he got a chance to. This is England, of course. He got a chance to go to Italy, where he got a chance to read the works of Boccaccio, Dante, and Petrarch. Very important Italian Renaissance writers. Now, don't forget, the printing press hasn't been invented yet, so every single book in existence has been written out by hand, which makes it takes a long time to do and makes the books very expensive. So there aren't many books in existence. If you get an author like Dante who writes a really good book, yeah, he's going to hire basically a small army to recopy by hand all of his work. But those books aren't usually, unless they're prepaid, they aren't usually shipped out. They're kept there. So if you want to study a famous Italian writer, you go to Italy. And his work as messenger for the king allowed him to do that. Now, he also had a lot of other jobs. He was a controller of customs, he was clerk of the king's works, deputy forester, representative of the shire. And what this means is he got to meet a lot of different people, and he got a chance to get to know them, both high ranking nobility, commoners, low ranking, members of the church. He just met a little bit of a wide spectrum of society. Now, he writes this poem called uh, Canterbury Tales, excuse me, primarily as a way of making fun of different parts of the culture, specifically the church. He really holds the church over the coals because they have a lot of power and they do abuse it. Um, the Catholic Church, of course, was the only church in existence for thousands of years. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. But anyway, so you get all these pilgrims, travelers, who meet up at this one inn, this one hotel called the Tablard Inn, south of London, and they're going to all go to the shrine of St. Thomas of Becket in Canterbury, England. The reason for going there, well, it's partly a religious pilgrimage, a religious journey to pay homage and to seek forgiveness of sins. It's also kind of a vacation, kind of a getaway, kind of a, let's get away from the house for a little while and go do something different. So Chaucer writes about this journey to Canterbury. He puts himself in the story as a main character, and in fact, he's the judge of the contest. When they're having dinner there at the Tabard Inn the night before they leave, he's the one who proposes the idea. He says, let's have a contest. Each of us will tell 2 stories on the way there, 2 stories on the way back, and then I will judge who wins, and whoever wins gets their trip paid for and all their meals paid for. Food was expensive back then. And he says, if anybody disagrees with my judgment, they have to pay for me. Surprisingly, they all agree. Of course, they're characters in a story. So they're going to go to the shrine of St. Thomas of Becket in Canterbury. Now, who was St. Thomas of Becket? I'm glad you asked. He was this guy. He was a friend of King Henry II. Okay, and he's a political friend and a close ally, and the church had been giving King Henry II some trouble, so he decides to post this good friend of his in as the Archbishop of Canterbury. And he says, therefore, I'll have a friend on the inside, and I can, kind of minimize the trouble the church is causing. But guess what? Thomas Becket goes from being close friend and political ally. He becomes more and more religious over time until he finally becomes devoted to the church and becomes another pain in the side to the king. So the king has a meeting with some of his knights, a small group, and he apparently says something to the effect, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest? Unfortunately, he says it with some of his knights around, and they kind of take his word as law, and they think he wants them to go kill him. So they do. They leave London, they go to Canterbury, and Sir Thomas of Becket is in church. And one story has it that he's kneeling at the altar in prayer, and the knights just ride up there on their horse and chop his head off, and it rolls, and they've got a little monument there in the middle of the cathedral to show where his head stopped rolling. But of course, it makes him a martyr. The people greatly love and admire him because he has sacrificed his life in service to the church, i.e., in service to the commoners. And so it's just one more misstep for King Henry II. And so all these people go to Canterbury to pay homage to this guy who was sacrificed for them. All right. So, in telling this story, there are 29 pilgrims plus the host, and they're supposed to tell 2 stories there and 2 stories back. Chaucer never finishes it. I think he gets 1 story going in from each pilgrim. Who are these pilgrims? The knight, the squire, who's his son, the yeoman, the prioress, who's the head of a convent, a priest, a monk, a friar, a merchant, an Oxford student who's very poor, but he has all these books, and books are expensive. A lawyer, a country gentleman, some guildsmen, weaver, dyer, carpenter, candlemaker, a skipper, a physician, a woman of Bath, a poor town parson, a manciple, and of course the speaker, Geoffrey Chaucer. And they're going along and they're just telling their stories. He starts off with the knight. Chaucer obviously admires members of the court, and probably the knight would have won the contest if they had gotten a chance to finish. And that's the Canterbury Tales. You get 29 people, well, 30 people, actually 31, riding on this religious pilgrimage, and they're going to go really slow. And it's supposed to take about 3 or 4 days, but the way Chaucer describes it, it's going to take 11 days. So they're obviously making some side trips, or they're pausing for a while and just kind of having a leisurely little journey to this religious site. And then they're going to turn around and come back to London, where I guess they're all based or home is. And it's a nice little tale, and there's some bawdiness going on, and there's some mocking of the church, and there's some heroics by the knight, and it's just, it's a interesting little poem. He Chaucer describes these characters by looking at their job, their clothing, their accessories, their pets, their jewelry and stuff, the way they act, their income, their accent, and their secrets. So he reveals a lot about his culture through his characters. But it's a delightful little story, and I hope you'll get a chance to read at least a little bit more about Geoffrey Chaucer and the general prologue. And if you get a chance, it wouldn't hurt to take a look at a couple of the tales from some of the pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. Okay, next week, week 13, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I really think you'll like this story, but you've just absolutely got to read it. Why? Well, the way it's constructed, it's a poem. It's a book length poem, and it's really really well told. But it's also really really well written. There's lots of alliteration where he repeats the same letter in several words in a line. You guys know what alliteration is. So there's lots of alliteration. It has a very tight, what they call a bob and wheel construction to each stanza, each refrain. I'm sorry, at the end of the stanzas, and plus it's a really great superhero story. I mean, the guys who directed the Avengers would have a field day with this story because it really was a larger than life story. Of course, you guys know who King Arthur was. This is part of the King Arthur tale, and King Arthur is kind of like Superman because he has a bunch of heroes surrounding him, and then each story, each hero or knight has their own origin story, their own adventures, both individually and as part of the round table. And it's really, really fascinating. King Arthur was the one whom we credit with moving their society, their culture, from laws based on privilege and strength, might makes right. He moved it to making laws based on what's good for the general people, based on the church, although the church itself was not particularly good to the commoners. But um, now, was there a real King Arthur? The character was probably based on a real person, King Arturus, who lived in the northeast part of England, upper right corner, and worked to unite different aspects of that culture. But anyway, so you want to read the poem because there's just a lot going on. It moves very fast, and it's really not very long. Um, but you get the story of this great green knight who rides in during the middle of one of the round table sessions and challenges King Arthur to this amazing duel or contest. And yeah, then Sir Gawain has to stand up for him, and it's really a fascinating thing. We'll go over some more next week, but I do encourage you to read the story for yourself. It's not something it's not the type of writing you're probably used to reading, but you can read it. It's not written in Old English or Middle English. It's you'll need a translation, of course, but I think the translation I posted up is a pretty good one. I'll double check. If not, you can find a better translation online and read it and kind of see what happens because it's a really pretty interesting story. Now, there's a lot of religious allusions. Okay, King Arthur and Sir Gawain lived in a time where religion, where the church really ruled society, had an undue influence in a lot of ways, and so um, when Sir Gawain is getting ready, of course, that's why he has the Virgin Mary painted inside his shield so he can look at her for inspiration. He has the cross on the outside for protection. And yeah, there's just lots and lots of scriptural and biblical allusions. And that should give you some hint as to the Green Knight. I'll also give you this little bit of foreshadowing. In the days of King Arthur in the Middle Ages, they viewed the forest and nature differently than we do today. Today, nature is very natural, it's good, it's wholesome, it's green, it's growing, it's just beautiful, and everybody admires nature. In those days, nobody really knew much about nature. Nobody knew what was hiding behind the trees. And when the sun went down and the lights went out, it got really dark and really scary. And they didn't really know all the animals or what other sort of forces might be hiding in the woods, waiting to attack them. And so those things of nature had much more of a supernatural or evil connotation in their culture, whereas in ours, everything nature is positive and upbeat and happy and wholesome and all unicorns and rainbows. But anyway, so kind of keep that in mind that the Green Knight was viewed or linked to evil, which as soon as you read the story, you'll find out he is. Um, and anything associated with the church or the court was good, which, yeah, generally was true. Enjoy your reading assignments. I think your paper is due next week. Yeah, looks right, next Sunday. So we'll post another video up on that. Um, just pick one of those assignments and really remember you want to narrow the focus. You want to pick one specific aspect of one specific character, one specific event, or one specific quote, and just tell how it made you feel, your reaction to it. Why did it happen? Why didn't it happen this way? What would have happened if something different had happened? Yeah, just your raw emotional response to it and explain that. Don't retell the story. All right. Hope you enjoy your reading assignments this week. We'll talk some more later.